HR, as we know, is responsible for how people are managed, and there are a number of ways in which HR has an impact on trust, and we're going to be looking at those today. HR in particular looks at the people of an organisation and the relationships between colleagues, the relationships between bosses and with employees, and that gives it significant potential to shape the trust within those relationships. HR promotes trust and trustworthiness by incentivizing or constraining people to behave in certain ways. Another way in which it also has an impact is that HR and HRM sends out the signals and the cues as to their employer's trustworthiness. The third way in which HR and HRM contributes to trust is that it helps to shape what we call the psychological contract. If that psychological contract is met, in other words, your expectations are fulfilled and the employer's expectations are fulfilled, great. We have a trusting relationship. Where trust can break down is that one party to that psychological contract, they have had their expectations undermined or potentially violated, and the consequences that that has on distrust. Remember that in the definitions that we were looking at about trust, trust is a willingness to rely on another party, such as your colleagues or your employer, on the basis of confident, positive expectations. So the psychological contract is all about those mutual expectations. All of these create the decisions, the trust beliefs, the decisions and behaviors that we've been talking about, which in turn, if we trust people, we have more engagement and we have commitment. If you don't trust people, you tend not to be engaged. You tend to be disengaged. That has a consequence, we know, for internal performance within the organisation and then for employees' well-being. If we think about HRM, it's what managers do, and how HRM is conceived, designed and implemented is going to shape employees' trust beliefs, their attitudes and their decisions and their behaviours. HRM interventions impact on how much people trust each other at work, trust their boss, trust their employer. Companies that are good to work for and companies where people enjoy working, they tend to reinforce the level of trust. So to what extent is the design and the implementation of a given HR policy either demonstrating the attributes of trustworthiness from the employer or is encouraging the attributes of trustworthiness in staff? The way in which people are selected, for example, the way and who becomes the leaders and the heroes of an organisation. Training managers in trust building and trust repair. The way in which people are incentivized to be trustworthy or potentially not, and to be trustworthy to whom. What signals and incentives do our job designs, the targets and the rewards send about trust and trustworthiness, and also the volume and the coherence of the signals. If you're sending out certain signals that are mutually incompatible with each other. But we have an ethical culture here. Where we pride ourselves on our values, but just as long as you hit the targets, we will turn a blind eye. Okay? You get the idea.
We've spent a lot of time on this whole question of building trustworthy organizations. And I have to be honest, some of it's rather frustrating in terms of getting people to really focus on this subject. And I think one of the reasons is trust really is nobody's job. Maybe it's the compliance people's job, you know.
I guess I'm going to argue with you because I'm a trust and compliance officer at IBM. It's my job.
But think about it. So just think about this for a second. If I went and called up 100 marketing people and said, we want you to spend a day talking about trust, what % do you think would come? If I called up 100 finance people and said, we want you to come and talk really learn about trust for a day, what % would come? If I called up the chief communications officers and said, we want to talk about trust, what %? Maybe a little higher, right? And it's interesting, and I've had this experience where you communicate with ethics people, compliance people, and some of them actually don't think. Many compliance people, I think you're an exception, don't actually think that their job is trust. And they actually don't feel even qualified to talk about trust at the organizational level. They are in the rules business. So it's sort of interesting to ask, whose job is trust? Now, obviously, I think we all, having been through the past couple of days, know it's everybody's. right? And it's important to reputation. But in the reality of the world we live in today, with schedules and busy and running and job security and blah, 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 if I said to you, I want you to come all day and talk about trust, a lot of people would say, hey, have a good time.
Yeah.
The final conclusion then is that compliance is a way of reassuring the organisation and colleagues of the trustworthiness of colleagues and of leaders and of representatives, and HR has a role to play as well in also reinforcing the trust and trustworthiness inside companies. They have a different toolkit. Perhaps one of the things that is one of the challenges is that if compliance has their toolkit and HR has their toolkit, then that's an awful lot of tools being being thrown around, and but that could be one of the reasons why trust gets proceduralized to such a degree, and perhaps my final parting shot would be that HR and compliance need to sit and talk together as well, just as much. Okay, thank you. Yeah.